Going back to 2006, what did you do to make the film go viral? Or I know, realize you didn't orchestrate it, but to prompt it to go viral?
You know, I think the movie had like one of the, first of all, we started out with this idea that we were just going to make a really crappy, and I can say that now, you know, I don't think at the time we said the word crappy, but we were going to make this really crappy, low budget zombie movie and just sell it to the highest bidder so we could make our next movie. And that was sort of the old paradigm. If you remember, that's how everybody used to think about movie making prior to the VOD revolution. You know, this was still the era of DVDs, but what we didn't realize is 2005, 2006, things were shifting, where we were shifting away from like, hey, we're just going to sell it to the highest bidder, to now video on demand's coming in here, and it's going to start chomping away at some of the DVD potential out there. So in order to make the movie go viral, first of all, we started with a hook that was incredibly memorable. I'm almost like, at this point, I've grown so far past it that I almost don't like talking about it, but it was the hook was zombies that attack a camp for the mentally challenged. And that was our hook. We were going to make this outrageous movie. But I will tell you that through the years, and this was back in 2006, we've gotten responses from special needs communities to where they were like, Jason, we loved how you made the heroes, you know, you never crossed the line. Everybody was empowered to become these zombie fighting action heroes. And in fact, our tagline was, sometimes heroes ride the short bus. So once that got out on the internet, once we posted a teaser trailer on YouTube, it skyrocketed. That trailer ended up on so many different websites, you know, the types of sites that post those things like Gorilla Mask and College Humor and National Lampoons, and you name it, it was out there and people were sharing it. And that was driving traffic back to our primary website for the movie. Except at the time, personally, I didn't know a lot about internet marketing. I was just learning the basics. So we weren't capturing any of the traffic that was coming to our site. We just left it kind of fall off the map. And, you know, in retrospect, that was a huge mistake, because we're talking like, there were over 100,000 people that came to that site. And I just, you know, I don't have those emails to this day. We didn't do anything to capture it. So all of this was taking place, the movie was going viral, and meanwhile we were still waiting, as most filmmakers do, for this $1 million distribution deal. I mean, imagine that. Like, thinking about it today, it sounds ludicrous, because now you might look at it as a modern movie maker and say, I have 100,000 people coming to my website. Why do I even need a distributor? You know, because you can access the marketplace. You can have a link on your website that takes people where you need to go to make the sale. But we just weren't thinking that way.
Were you using MySpace at the time also to promote it, or what were you using in terms of social media? That's
awesome that you brought up MySpace. Yeah, as a matter of fact, MySpace was one of the early tools that we were using. And I remember doing like this is where I was getting into internet marketing, and I've always been into computers, so it made sense to me. This idea that you could go out on these websites and find people that were interested in your type of movie and then market directly to them. So MySpace had some tools set up that were really primitive, but you were able to target interest. And I had bought this piece of software that allowed me to find people that were into zombie movies. And I just started emailing a lot of those people and saying, hey, we just did the zombie movie, come check it out. And we found that helped, you know, that helped a little bit. It was very one-on-one, sending emails. But what I didn't realize is that one-on-one engagement, I was building relationships with my audience without even thinking about them. You know, the way we talk, everybody talks about audience engagement today like it's something you can buy in a box. But back then, like, that was real deal grassroots audience engagement, actually getting to know the people in your audience. And then a few of those people would go out and spread word and bring more traffic back to the website. So it was cool. But one of the things that really drove traffic was StumbleUpon, being a social bookmarking site. That was really interesting to us. We found that the vast majority of our traffic after time was coming from people stumbling and then sharing it with their communities and sharing it with their communities and so on and so forth. And then interestingly, the only ad dollars we spent, and it was probably only a few $100s, you know, if you were to add it all up through the years, was to grease the wheels at StumbleUpon. Because I found that for 5 cents, you could go on there and find somebody that was, you know, loosely targeted, somebody into horror movies, and I could pay to have them see our website for the movie. And that was cool because we were getting what they call in internet marketing a conversion rate, the amount of people that actually come to your site and buy what it is you want them to buy. I don't remember the figures, but StumbleUpon was delivering for that particular movie a really good conversion rate, which meant people were stumbling and they were like, oh, I got to buy it now. That was cool. Just for the record, I've since tried StumbleUpon for about every other movie I've worked on, and it's never caught on quite the same way. So I think you have to have some weird, memorable hook, almost to the point of exploitation. Speaking about that in like a very general way, in other words, it has to be so remarkable that people can walk away from a party and be like, yeah, I met the guy that's making that weird zombie movie, and like they remember it. But if you're like the guy that's making the the movie about purple pine cones, like maybe that's not as exciting to people.
Right. Interesting. And you built the website yourself?
I had a good buddy from college named Tom Socash that still builds websites, and he built our original website. Originally, it was like this really awesome Flash website that when you went there, you had people screaming, and then blood flew up on the screen, and there was some music. And he even built this like Flash player. This is before we put the movie on YouTube. But what we found when we went from the period of time where you're promoting the movie while you're in festivals, what we found was there's a time where you go from promoting to the time you go to selling. And what we found was there was a lot of traffic getting lost on all the behind the scenes photos and all the extra stuff that you really don't need. So that's when we whittled the site down and said, okay, here's the logo, here's the tagline, some testimonials, the trailer, and a big buy now button.
So going back to 2006, what still works from that experience and what is totally outdated?
Well, I think what works from that experience is still you have to come up with a movie that's remarkable, that people are going to talk about, that they're going to remember. And I think if you're an unknown filmmaker, while I wouldn't advocate getting quite as risque as we did, you should come up with a concept that has a little bit of that's a little bit polarizing, where people either like it or hate it. Because I think if you hit that middle ground, and a lot of filmmakers try to play safe in that middle ground, especially first-time filmmakers, because they don't want to offend people like their mom. By the way, my mom loved our movie.
Oh, good.
Only because we never crossed that line. I feel like I have to keep bringing that up because for those reasons. Like back then I was like, oh, it's so controversial and awesome. And now I've been in the profession for so long that I'm like, wait, that's my first movie. Like, do we have to keep talking about it,
Well, is that the litmus test then? Do you kind of push it so maybe you can't show it to your mom and dad?
Because there's people that'll say that, right? And I think I agree with it to a point, but it still has to be a good movie. It's one thing to have a concept where people are like, I got to see that. And that's what most movies try to do anyway, with their trailers and their advertising campaigns and all of that. But once they get to see it, it still has to hold up. It has to be, really good or engaging on some front, or it either has to be so bad it's good. Not that I know the filmmakers that made The Room, but I've seen that. I've seen The Room, yeah. And I'm like, I've watched it, and I'm like, I don't know what this is about, but it's awesome because it's not so good. And to that filmmaker's credit, and which I got to meet him eventually, to his credit, my gosh, he turned that around. And he's like, it's a black comedy, best movie of the year, and I'm like, best movie of the year. These are memorable pieces, but I don't know if it can be orchestrated. I think you can come up with like a controversial hook, but can you make a movie within the hook that still holds people's interest? And I think that's a challenge for all filmmakers.